I could take a break from this world. Running on a hamster wheel, but searching for something I can't feel. I just wanna be a lost girl and fly. Take a breath, feel my wings spread, levitate above the ground and make eye contact with clouds. Now I'm rising, I'm soaring above it all. I just wanna be free, finally, I wanna be free, finally, I wanna be free, finally, I wanna be free, finally. I always stay dreaming, never imagined I lose my spark. Living in this crazy time, putting back the pieces of my mind. I know how to run from the dark and fly. Feel my wings spread, levitate into the clouds. I'm so high above the ground. I'm rising, I'm soaring above it all. I just wanna be free, finally, I wanna be free.
Race, conversations, and law enforcement. This is Moses' People Speak. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Moses People Speak. I'm your host, Terry Watson, the founder of Strategies for Justice. I'm very excited today for our guest today, Shawn Kennedy. And I know we're going to have a great conversation. In the chat box, tell us where you're watching from. Remember, please like and share so we can get some great conversation to happen. Also, Shawn Kennedy has agreed to do an after party. So if the conversation is getting really good and we're going to stay a little bit later, that is okay too. But before we get going, a couple of announcements, of course. So next week, actually next Tuesday, the registration will open for the Symposium on Conscious Law Enforcement and Inclusive Practices. Last night, we had a wonderful forum. Really great turnout, great feedback, and this is going to be sort of the culmination of the forums we've done in the past, and really looking forward to this symposium. So please register for the symposium, and registration will open next week. All right. I want to say the next Moses People Speak will be on March 9th. We're going to be talking to our dear sister, Susan Pruitt, who is the founder of the Black Police Experience. And she has been on the special episode with the Capitol, but this time she's going to be talking about the Black Police Experience, what she's doing, and I look forward to that discussion as well. One more announcement too. If you guys don't know, Carrier Horn's court date is this Friday at 1 p.m. in Buffalo. Due to COVID, it's going to be virtual. And what I'm going to ask people to do is to send some good vibes to Carrier. Again, we're looking to get her pension back. And when she finally gets her pension back, hopefully, she'll be made whole. And I think it's been too long that she has not had a pension, but now is the time. So hopefully Buffalo does the right thing. So this Friday is going to be her court date at 1 p.m. So please send Carrier some good vibes. So I mentioned this gentleman actually at the last conversation I had with Charles Billups. The gentleman name is Clyde Kerr. And one thing about this story that is so impactful to me, at least, is that one, obviously, he's talking about mental health, and unfortunately, this brother did take his own life. But he also left some to-dos, like things that we could actually do today, right now, to make things better between law enforcement and the community. And so I think he posted 4 videos or 3 to 4 videos. I did take some clips from one of the videos. I want to show that video because I think it's going to lead into our great discussion today with Shawn about mental health and policing. So if we could just take a quick gander at some of the things that Clyde said before passing away.
I've had enough of all of this nonsense of serving a system that does not give a damn about me or people like me, or just about life in general. And this is my statement. This isn't something to state that this killing that's going on, especially by the police, which I am, I can't abide by this no more. I'm not having anything to do with this nonsense anymore. Mental health and wellness, they definitely need that. Look, we need, I don't know how you're gonna do it. We get people get one psych eval or just checkup, and that's in the hiring process. And some people have squeaked through, because I know some cops that should not be cops, honestly. They just, I don't think they have the makeup for it. And they're gonna say, oh, he did. No, this not even night and day. Whether it be, I don't think annual is good because a lot can happen a year, whether that be semi-annual or quarterly. It needs to happen. And it's in the stigma that is surrounding it needs to be lifted too, because that is insane. We need help. People need help. It's okay to say you need help. You get exposed to a lot going through life. But only life matters. That's it. You get exposed to a lot. I understand it. I've been exposed to a lot. More transparency. I understand certain things can't be divulged, but the public doesn't trust us. We are losing the public's trust. Development and expansion of like an Explorer type program. I know they've had it before, but kids say they want to be cops, but I mean, we're not giving them a reason to, do it. And we need to foster more mentorship. And it needs to be like more of some kind of a program to help kids stay on a scared straight. Let's bring that back. Let them see what it's like. But also give them a healthy option. Just get them out and just like get them out of their normal hoods or whatever it is.
Wow. Well, one brother Shawn, welcome to Moses People Speak. It's a pleasure to have you on, man.
Thank you, Terry. I appreciate the invite.
Yes. So, matter of fact, Shawn, you were the one to actually point me in the direction of these videos. I think you posted on your social media. Then we talked on the phone for about a good half an hour to 45 minutes about this brother who took his life, unfortunately. So I want to ask you, this to go out the gate. What was the most powerful piece for you with Brother Clyde Kerr?
Oh my goodness, because I watched all 3 of his videos. He was actually vocalizing what some officers who have taken their own life actually feel inside, that we have no idea, because they may or may not leave a note. We try to figure out, well, what's going on? Why did they do this? Especially if they have small kids. What Clyde Kerr did that was different is he recorded what was happening with him. He let it be known how he felt. And it's interesting because there was a point in his video that he said, if you would have asked me this a week ago, last Friday, that I'm going to be doing what I'm about to do, I would have told you no. So, I kind of wonder what changed, but I can hear his frustration. I can feel his anger and the fact that he felt as if there were no other option for him to go. It really hurt my heart, especially when I watched his other 2 videos when he was actually driving around in his department vehicle. And you can kind of tell that he was getting closer and closer to that point that he was going to take his life, and no one around him knew about it. And that's because he did not want anyone to stop him. He had already made up his mind what he was going to do, and he did not want any type of interruption. I get a lot of people who would say, well, how could you do this and you have kids? And when you're in that frame of mind, you're not thinking the way that everyone else is thinking, but your reality, your rationale is real to you. So sometimes they're feeling that this is the best thing for my children. Their rationale is different.
Right. And I gotta say too, when I watched the video, I had a hard time sleeping that night too, because I felt that I really wish he felt he had someone to go to, right? That he had someone to turn to say, I'm feeling this way and I need help. And I thought about the stuff that NABLEO highlighted in the winter, right? In the newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to post that. I already posted it on the website, but I'm going to post it here in a chat too, so people can read it later on. But can you talk about that newsletter you guys posted in the winter, and why was that so important?
Okay, so first let me say that I am a retired sergeant from Chicago Police Department. I've worked there for the last 29 years. In the last 2 years, I worked for our EAP program, which is Employee Assistance Program. So I dealt with, police suicides, different mental illnesses, and so forth. Now, even though supposedly statistically, the most risky part for an officer as far as taking their own life is really in the summertime, but we still relate the holidays like Thanksgiving, Christmas, because that's the time that officers normally will spend with their family. You have a lot of officers who are estranged from their family, whether it's divorce, broken relationships, or so forth. I think about officers who want to see their children, but because of restraining orders or any number of things, they spend time by themselves. But we have noticed that when the holiday seasons come, when it's very pertinent for an officer to spend time with their children like anyone else, it can bring on a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. Now, also, what made us want to actually put that newsletter out on December 31st, we also thought about the fact that this was the first time that we can remember of us going through a pandemic. We thought it would be here for a month or two, and we actually have gone through it for the entire year. That has really changed a lot of officers as far as how they have felt, as far as not being able to get out and do things that they would normally do to try to take a break from what they see at work every day. A lot of places were shut down. It was limited. People had to stay in their houses. That created a lot of trauma for officers. And I also think about during the summer of 2020, you had all of the riots, the looting, people hating the police. So, and while this was going on, many police departments, their officers had their days off canceled. They were working 12 plus hours a day. There were some officers I spoke to who worked 15 days straight, to the point that by the time you come home, all you can do is eat a bite, go to bed, and you already know that your mind is prepared for what you have to face the next day. So I had thought about, because we had just put out a newsletter, I believe around December the 10th. And it's like, we need to put something together to try to address these issues. And we had a lot of different articles that we were able to pull from. We wanted to not just talk about suicides or PTSD or depression. And some of those stories was from actual officers based on what they have gone through. We want to talk about also sleep deprivation, the importance of exercising, your health, your nutrition. We want to talk a variety of things so that any officer or citizens who have access to our website, once they actually read our newsletter, hopefully they will get something from it. And that was what our objectives were.
Right. So Shawn, I think you sort of dived in a little bit about the NABLEO, and again, I think I met with you and Chuck a couple of months ago for the first time. And for those who don't know, so the episode on the Capitol, Shawn was very important in gathering people together to have the discussion. So, even though Shawn, we have you here as our guest, you've really been part of this show already
Behind the scenes, yes.
behind the scenes. But one thing I wanted to sort of point out, ask you about NABLEO's role. So I had a chance to go through the mission. One of the things that really stuck out to me was the phrase "eradicate police misconduct," and honestly, I think that's something that most organizations don't really outright say. Is usually it's trying to increase diversity, what have you not, but for an organization to outright say eradicate police misconduct. So my question to you is, how can we do that? How can we eradicate police misconduct?
Okay, first of all, when we talk about eradicating police misconduct, people always thinking about what police officers are doing to residents of the community, which is, police misconduct. Included in that, we also mean the police misconduct that officers are doing against their own officers. We have to take a stance on speaking out when we see misconduct because we're from the community, and trust me, and it's not just a white and black issue. If we see black officers who are mistreating the residents in our community, we're going to speak out and come after you the same way we would anyone else. We are being paid, taxpayer dollars are behind, our salaries. That's why we're even here, based on the money that taxpayers have put out there. They want officers who they can feel they can trust, officers that when they call 911, they're not worrying about an officer coming there and instead of helping the situation, exacerbating it where someone is going to lose their life.
Right.
They want to feel comfortable enough that when a police car drives down the street, they can wave at that officer and the officer will wave back because they don't feel that they're a threat. But the reality in the black community, a lot of times that black citizens do not trust the police. And the police have given them reasons not to do that. Now, you can also talk to black officers. When we take off our uniform, we're still black, period. There are times when I'm driving in my car and I'll put on a hoodie because I love wearing hoodies. But in the back of my mind, I'm still thinking about, okay, when I pass this officer, they're going to give me a certain look because all they see is a hoodie and they're going to associate that with some type of stereotype. They have no idea who I am. And for some officers, they do not care. So we know that unless we're willing to speak up and speak out as a national organization, it's going to continue, and we're not going anywhere.
Yes. Well, you died in a couple of things. So I want to follow up on a thing you just mentioned. So, one, thinking about this concept of eradicating misconduct within the police departments themselves. So you and I showed Carrie Horn her court case is this week, and we're trying to give her some positive vibes. I spoke to Carrie a couple of times this week. We're praying that she is finally made whole. But she's not the only one. You and I actually originally connected because of Nakia Jones. And so my question to you then is, one, what stops police officers from speaking out when they see this misconduct? Like, what is it? Because there really shouldn't be a Nakia Jones situation. There shouldn't be a Carrie Horn situation, but here we are, right? So what stops police in general from speaking out against these types of issues?
Well, in my experience, in my opinion, I feel that fear is a big part of it. Carrie Horn, even though she had support, a lot of things that she went through, and in particular Nakia Jones, they went through by themselves. They felt isolated. A lot of times when someone steps up and speaks out either against the department or on behalf of a citizen because they're watching another officer mistreat them, a lot of times instead of praising that officer, a department will close rank and they will actually start to retaliate against that officer. It's just opposite of what you would expect. So when many officers, Black officers specifically, see that, instead of trying to stand by that particular officer and give their support, and I mean public support, not just behind the scenes, a lot of times officers kind of stand back because whatever is happening to that particular officer, they don't want any type of retribution to themselves. And it reminds me somewhat of back in the slavery days, when you take that one slave who ran away and you make an example out of that slave in front of everyone else, it kind of keeps everyone in check and everyone in their place, quote unquote. But that's a very effective tool. So as a national organization, we try to support officers where we feel that we can actually make a difference, because we don't want like a Nakia Jones to be out there by herself. I had no idea about her case in 2016, but once I learned about it in 2020, personally and part of my organization, we have started to do things to help her get past. I mean, she is a phenomenal woman, and also carry a horn. We just don't want another officer out there by themselves. And the more we're actually using our social media platforms, the more officers are reaching out to us from just nationwide, sharing their stories with them. And those officers in different situations, we're able to actually come together and give them some type of support, because we do not want them out there by themselves.
Right. And yesterday we had our forum on diversity in law enforcement, and I think we had over about 280 people RSVP, and I don't know the final numbers of people who actually attended, but I do know the numbers of people who responded to the evaluation, and who submitted questions. And I remember going through the questions yesterday, and the questions really were geared towards how do we create a culture, especially in law enforcement, where people of color who join law enforcement don't feel that they can't be themselves, they can't speak out, they can't, there's a lot of can'ts that came from those questions. So my question with NABLEO is, one of the things I noticed too with NABLEO is you guys do a lot of education, not just in law enforcement, not just police education, but even your last webinar was on the financial stability, and so you're doing more than just eradicating misconduct, but you also provided education. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the things that you guys plan on doing?
So our upcoming webinar, which is going to be March the 23rd, is called Academy of Financial Wellness.
Yes, that's what I'm referring to. Yes. So
one of the things that oftentimes I overlook with officers is their money. There are officers who I know. There's one officer in particular that I work with who I did not know had a gambling problem. I did not find that out, even though people who were closer to her knew that. I had no idea until I came to work one day and I was told that she took her own life. And then that really added another dimension to police suicide, because the finances is a very important component. And think about this, and not everyone who's having financial problems are going to go through this, but think about someone who has been divorced. So you're going from a 2-family income down to 1, and some of your money you now have to pay in child support and maybe alimony. So your finances as a particular officer, whether it's male or female, it's going to change, and that can cause a lot of stress. Now, officers work a tremendous amount of overtime, not all officers, but many officers. But even in situations where you have divorce cases, if you're not being paid cash under the table, they can actually come after that as well. So, but that, like I said, that is a very big component for some officers who have taken their lives. So we felt it was important to talk about your finances as far as planning for your retirement, and not waiting till 5 years prior to retiring, but maybe 10 years before, just to understand what you can be doing now to make sure that once you retire 10 years from now, that you are in a financial situation where you're comfortable, in that transition into retirement can be very very comfortable. But we also talk about how officers can create a budget for themselves. We talk about how you have to be careful working all this overtime because officers are able to work so many different places overtime, in some type of security capacity. A lot of times we chase the money over spending time with our family. And then we wonder why a few years later, our spouse wants to divorce us or our relationships are broken. So that's something else a lot of times you don't think about until you actually get to that situation. So, we try to address issues, just various issues that actually affect officers, because we have to have healthy officers if we expect them to be able to serve and protect the community with the type of compassion and understanding that they deserve. But if you have an officer who is having some type of issues or problem, they're not going to be able to give their full selves to the community.
Right. Now, I gotta say too, I learned something. I actually learned a lot of things in the newsletter that you guys put out. But there was one thing that I had no idea about, even in my field. And this was a conversation about shift work disorder, right? I never came across my table before, and I'm thinking about two things. And I want to dive into this too, by the way. Okay. But you mentioned earlier about one of the things about 2020 with the summer, with the riots, with the protests happening, with just policing overall. I spoke to a couple of officers recently that talked about working 13, 14-hour shifts and then having like 8 hours off and going back to it, So I'm thinking in the world that we live in now, how important is it for, I guess, police departments to be aware of shift work disorder?
Well, it's very important because, when I came on the job in 1990 with the Chicago Police Department, we rotated shifts. So we will work midnights for one period, afternoons for another, and morning for another. Now that has changed where you work a straight shift. But your body, your biological clock, it naturally, connects with what's happening with the sun. At nighttime, things start to change. Even when we're putting seminars together. When I was still with the Chicago Police Department, we will have whatever seminar we would put together for officer wellness. We would have one in the morning hours for the officers working in the mornings, and we'll also put one in the evening hours. So regardless to how engaging the presentation was, I did recognize a difference with the officers who were coming for the latest shift, because your body starts to slow down and unwind down. And so you have to kind of change your sleep pattern, and you have to try to fight what's natural, what's happening with your body. So it's something I had never thought about because I just did what I had to do. But when I started conducting some research on it, I realized it does change what's happening with your body. So not only is that a problem, but when you look as far as when your body and your mind is sleep deprived, there's not enough time for you to wind down and decompress, especially during the summer 2020, before you have to go back out there and not just do your regular job, but now you at a much heightened awareness because you're dealing with different rioters and protesters and people who might actually hurt you. So that was a very big component we wanted to identify to let people know how important it is. And sometimes officers will find themselves sleep deprived, just working their regular shifts, but working all these other part-time jobs and never get enough rest. Now, I was able to do it when I was in my 20s and 30s. But I started getting toward my 50s. It's like, yes, I can do it, but it's like too much recovery time. So there's a difference.
I remember the first time I did a training with law enforcement. I was training, it was about 200 cops. And I think about half the group came to me and they were like, I'm going to apologize up front if I doze off. And I remember thinking to myself, well, thank you, I guess, like for the heads up. But they were explaining to me they had a night shift, and here I was presenting to them around 1:00 in the afternoon, and so I could definitely appreciate the especially the concept, but also that there's an importance that needs to be understood about understanding what the symptoms are, how to address it if you are feeling that, and again, just the overall wellness of being a police officer. Now, I want to take this to the other side of the road here, because we're definitely diving into the mental health piece and the well-being, but looking at police misconduct and behavior. What is, Shawn? What are some of the things that, especially thinking about the community, what does police need to do to, one, show that they're interested in eradicating police misconduct, and two, how do they sustain those relationships?
Okay, well, my personal opinion, in
Absolutely.
order for us to make a difference, and I'm not talking about just putting certain things out there for the press or whatever. We have to look at what's causing a lot of this police misconduct, and I want to specify actually what's happening in the Black community, because the trust is simply not there. All it takes is one incident to put us a few steps back. So one of the things that I like to look at is, I feel that in order to move forward and to actually start addressing police misconduct, there has to be accountability. But you have to kind of look at the structure of the police department. What's the foundation it was built upon? And it was built upon systemic racism. So if you have police departments who are not even willing to admit that systemic racism exists within the departments, there's no way you're going to be transparent. There's no way you're going to be able to move forward progressively and hold your officers accountable. Part of there's another fight where and we're trying to push it from our end as well, that we want to end qualified immunity, because it almost gives bad officers, a free pass to actually do some of the things they're doing as far as misconduct, and they're able to do it with impunity. It was never set up for the protection of the residents of the community. It was set up to protect officers. Now, it also covers judges and other officials, but like I said, we're trying to push the end for qualified immunity. Because if you are a good officer and you're out there and you're doing your job with good faith, of course you can make mistakes, but we're talking about someone who is intentionally, woefully, and wantonly out there harming citizens, many times Black citizens, whether it's using excessive use of force. And a lot of times officers who do this, if you see that there's no type of real penalty behind it, it kind of empowers you to keep doing it. And citizens see that. That's why you had such a huge eruption during the summer 2020. They were tired of seeing Black people, Black men in particular, killed, unarmed Black men killed by the police. It's to the point that it does good officers, it does them a disservice, because when things like that happen, it affects the entire department. People start looking at officers, even if you're Black, they look at you as an enemy, not understanding that you do have officers out there, Black and white, who do have the type of empathy to be out there with the community. It paints a broad brush for the police department. So I think that in order for there to be trust, there has to be accountability. If there's no accountability for police misconduct, regardless to what programs you put into place, the residents of the community are simply not going to buy it. They're not going to believe you. And the more, especially with social media, the more videos that pop up from body-worn cameras and people's cell phone, of police misconduct is ridiculous. It's not going to get better as long as we're seeing those things on a daily basis.
Right. It's interesting too. So to me, there's two folds to this, and I'll sort of give you an example. There's obviously the things that we need to address: the qualified immunity, duty to intervene, all those things that are put in a police language. Then there's the flip side of that, which the police officers that are doing the right thing, right? And when we were doing Carrio's law, Shawn, we titled it "The Law to Protect Good Police." That's exactly how we titled it, because the reason being is that we want to keep our good police officers on the streets. That's the goal, right? And we want to foster a culture in which the folks that are doing the right thing, we are keeping them on the job, and they don't feel stressed and they don't feel shunned away, right? But right now, that's not the case. When Carrio's law passed in Buffalo, the police union did not like that, and I was not confused. That's the wrong word to use. I wasn't confused, but I was definitely disheartened to see a law passed that's to protect good police and have the union not support that. So my question is, and I know NABLEO does a lot of work, and I see Brother Charles is watching. Hello, Brother Charles. How you doing? You see his comment there?
Yes.
But what NABLEO is doing is also trying to set the culture to have good police stay in. And I want to dive into a little bit about that, Shawn, is why is it so important to look at the culture of policing? Like you mentioned, qualified immunity. Why is it so important to look at the culture of policing, identify areas that need to be changed and change it? And other than the qualified immunity, is there any other areas that you think should be addressed?
Oh, of course. One thing they need to know, when you mentioned about a duty to intervene. So you have some departments who are creating policies for that. But if that policy doesn't have any type of teeth in it to enforce it, it's just words on a piece of paper. We also need a national whistleblowers act that's not just on the federal level, but covers county, municipal, and state law enforcement as well. There has to be something in place so that when you have someone like a Carrier Horn or Nakaya Jones speak up and speak out, that there will not be retribution. And if there's so, you can hold those individuals accountable. Like I said, until those things are in place, some officers are not going to feel empowered to speak up. And it's just the opposite. You would think that your departments will actually back you up and try to support you. But we have to look at, when we're speaking of Black officers, Black officers came on a job because they had to, kind of open the doors for Black officers. I don't feel that it was ever designed to have Black officers on the job. And I feel that in many instances, we're only tolerated. So when you look at the number of officers, when you go to a police graduation, probably in any municipality in this nation, it's very obvious the disproportionate number of Black officers that are there. You see it in the ranks, in upper management, the supervisors. You see it. You look at it also in how Blacks are disciplined. There are lawsuits going on right now based on Black officers being much more egregiously disciplined than their white counterparts. But like I said, a lot of times, unless someone's willing to speak about it and stand up and actually take some type of action, it continues to go on. And it's amazing because if you're from a small department, it's sometimes very difficult to actually speak out because you know that they're going to retaliate against you. And even if you do not know that, once you speak out, you find out.
Yeah. And, and I always ask this question too, Shawn, is what's changed in 100, well, in this case, 110 years, right? So this year, we're celebrating the 110th commemoration of battle becoming a police officer back in 1921. The gentleman that's right underneath you, that picture, that's my great grandfather. That's Moses P. Cobb. He was a police officer, first one in 1892. And some of the stories that I hear today, because police officers they do send me messages via email, via the website, and some of the stories that they're telling me today, my great grandfather and my great uncle were saying respectfully 120, 110 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always ask this question is what has changed in over a century? I'll let you open that one up, Shawn, because I'll give you the floor on that one.
Okay, so in my opinion, not much has changed. Like if I were to go back to the 60s, and I'm looking at Chicago Police Department, when we had the Afro-American Patrolman League that formed around 1968, just based on how Black citizens in the community were being treated. And this occurred after Dr. Martin Luther King was killed. I look at, they tried to stand up and fight as far as not having enough Black officers, not having officers in certain ranks or whatever, and they wound up filing a federal lawsuit. Now, you had old timers who are still alive, like Howard Saffold, and in particular, Renard Robinson. Renard Robinson, he went through so much retaliation. When I conducted an interview with him several years ago, I was just amazed at what he was subjected to, but he still prevailed. And luckily, the federal judge, Prentice Marshall, I think back in 1973, ruled in their favor, which forced the city of Chicago to bring more minorities on the job, which wasn't just for Black officers, but it also included women and also Hispanics. And so they also had to increase the number of promotions. But at the particular time, that then mayor was not ready to comply with it. So they held back any federal dollars to the city of Chicago until they complied. And once they did, organizations, other national organizations were able, like the NBPA, the National Black Police Association, they were able to take that precedent to other cities that were having the same problems, and they were able to get more officers as well. But over time, things kind of settled down, the different things that the National Black Police Association were doing, it became kind of complacent to the extent that, now we got a little piece of the pie, this piecemeal, that we have actually gotten very comfortable. But here we are, 2021, and we are still addressing the same issues that our forefathers and foremothers addressed back in the 60s. And back to when you said your relative came on the department. So like I said, all these piecemeal things is to appease and make you feel comfortable, but there hasn't been any substance change that we're looking for or what we need. And until that happens, you're going to keep having these different problems.
Yeah. And I'm always the one that say, I'm an optimistic person, right? Always. I'm always that person that glass half full kind of guy, right? But even in that perspective, sometimes I find myself struggling if what we're doing, if it's worth it, because you take one step or two steps forward. An incident happened like today, for example, Shawn, I'm not sure if you were familiar, but today there were two cases that popped up on my timeline that I've been following over the past couple of months. One was the Daniel Prude situation out of Rochester, New York. And then the other one was Elijah McCain. And both of those popped up on my timeline. And the reason why those two cases are so important to me is they sort of had a light shed on it over the summer, right? So 2020, the summer of 2020 should be like its own T-shirt, right? I survived 2020 because there is just, it was a summer like no other. It reminded me of the Spike Lee movie, Do the Right Thing, right? Where it was just like a power keg ready to explode. But those two cases, reminded me as I saw my timeline today, reminded me that there are some times where you are trying to move forward and something like that happens and it set us back all the time. Like, and you get tired after a while. It gets tiring, but I think it's also important that we still keep up that energy, to do that work. I want to know, people who are watching, do you guys have any questions? Please feel free to ask questions in the chat box. I will bring them up. Because one thing I do keep the eye on the time. Shawn, believe it or not, we are at 7:15, and that's how fast these things typically go. But I know you said you don't mind staying on for a little bit for after party. But my other thought too here is, do you see any connection between police departments that don't address mental health and misconduct? Do you see a direct correlation between the lack of addressing mental health issues and looking at police misconduct?
Well, some departments are much more progressive than others. Mm-hmm. I know it does take financial resources. Some departments may still want to be in the dark. When I look at Chicago Police Department, for instance, because we're a large department, we average between 4 and 6 police suicides a year. I can remember in 2018 in particular, that was my first knowledge of having on-duty police suicide. And it was actually happening in the cluster because it happened so close together within a month apart. That put a whole nother spin on it, because right before that happened in 2018, the Department of Justice, when they conducted their investigation with the Chicago Police Department, part of their investigation dealt with what were we doing to address mental issues. They looked at the fact that we had 13,000 plus people, but we only had 3 clinicians, and then they compared it with a smaller department in LA, and they had 13 clinicians. So wow. It's not about not having the financial resources, it's about allocating what it takes to make sure your officers are healthy, but that lets you know what the priorities was. But another big part of that is when we had a police suicide, no one talked about it openly. It was all talked behind closed doors. It was hush hush, so that that's how secrets are passed on. So why wouldn't officers step out and ask for assistance if it's like this hush hush bad secret? So one of the things that we felt was very important is to remove that stigma of reaching out for help and assistance for mental wellness. And there are, oh my goodness, there are so many different things we did in Chicago Police Department to address it. I feel that we actually went from like 10 to 100 plus. And that was one of the reasons why I was brought into the program. For instance, I look at our peer support members. These are officers who volunteer their personal time to be peer support members. They have passed the 40-hour training in order to do so. And so, like, say we have an officer hurt, officer killed, or any number of things, you have peer support members who will come in and try to help that officer and even conduct roll calls at that particular district or whatever. And we did a lot as far as responding to different incidents. But one of the questions I asked once I came into the program, what are we doing proactively to address what we know that officers are going through? We know in almost any district, any specialized unit or whatever, you're going to have an officer who has an alcohol problem, finance problem, dating problem, any number of things. But why do we wait until something happens before we address it? So I put together something that we were going to conduct officer wellness roll call training in all of our 22 districts on first watch, second watch, third watch, fourth watch, and also all of our specialized unit. And me being the optimistic person that I am, I thought we could do it in 2 weeks. It actually took 5 months to put this together. I mean, to actually carry it through, because I kept this roster to make sure that we had all the things that we needed to do. But it took 5 months, but we felt good that we were able to reach areas and districts and specialized units who have never seen us. And from actually going out there and candidly talking to officers, I cannot tell you the outreach we had. Officers, there was one roll call I went to, and there were 3 officers crying before I even started my presentation. So we just have officers out there who are going through problems, but no one wants to address it. And I can remember on the last day for our final roll call, 1 hour before we went out there, I got a call from one of our alcohol counselors to tell me we just had our 3rd on-duty police suicide. So that just kind of hit me. But when we went to that roll call, we were very open and we shared that information because it's no secret. We wanted to make sure that our department put out information to its members to let them know that we had another officer who had taken their own life instead of them finding out about it from the news. I remember one roll call we went to, an officer said, "Why don't you all put something out on PTSD?" Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, you have a smartphone, you can look it up, but that's not what they wanted. They wanted something to come from EAP. And just from that one suggestion, and that's why it's so important to listen to what people say, that one suggestion, we created a monthly newsletter to talk about PTSD or police suicides or depression. So we started listening and we started doing things to the point that people said, hey, y'all kind of overdoing it, but we needed to, kind of approach it from all different type of angles. But it made more officers feel comfortable enough to start reaching out, which is what our objective was.
Yeah, and I think too, Charles makes a really good point here, is that removing that stigma, right, and allowing a pathway for people to get help, right? And I know, Shawn, you and I talked about a couple of days ago some of the things you actually did to change the stigma about mental health. You mentioned one is now, but the one that I could think of was the mailing stuff to their house. I think that speaks a lot because, let's say as an officer, you may know you're struggling, but you may ignore the symptoms, right? But your partner will say, hey, this sounds like you, right? Maybe you should consider getting help. So can you just sort of tell everyone, at least give us a couple of things that you've done that's sort of outside the box thinking in addressing the mental health and the stigma?
Okay, so with that, once again, we listened. So a lieutenant sent me an email and said, have you thought about maybe creating a postcard to try to get to the family members? Because the family members see the changes in their officer loved one, but they may have no idea whatsoever why or what they can do about it. So we put together a postcard so that when a postcard goes to your house, anyone can see it at your house, and we addressed it to the family member of the officer. And we did this for officers and civilians. So we talked about our different resources, our contact telephone number, our public website, public-facing website. So we wanted the family members to know that there's assistance out there that's free for their family members. And I remember by the time we sent it out, and we went through a lot to get the labelings and whatever and send it out, that within 1 week, we had 25 new appointments from family members who, based on what they saw with their officer loved one, wanted to come and make a difference. We started creating a monthly superintendent speaker series where we brought in experts to come and talk about specific specific parts of mental wellness. And I remember one of our most successful ones was, I can't remember what it's called, but it was conducted by a husband and wife team, Paris Clark. And that one was amazing because now we're having not only the former officer speak about his experience, we're having the wife to talk about how it affected her life and one of her children's in particular. And for this particular workshops, and we always allow officers to come while they're on duty. so they can have a chance to, to do this. We encouraged them to bring their significant other ones to this, whether, your married girlfriend, boyfriend, didn't make a difference, because they need to hear this. And I remember, because we always had an evaluation, and we listened to the comments, and I can think about the number of officers when we finished the seminar and they walked out and they said, something, I wish I'd have brought my wife, and it was just that powerful. But we started, putting information out there based on what we felt there was a need to be shared and what other people need to hear. But we did a lot. And that was one of the reasons why when it came time for me to retire, I was not ready. I actually stayed several months longer just to put help to put more initiatives in place for officers.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We had a question here from Leslie. I'll put up on the screen. It's going to cover our faces. It's a long question. But I'll read it anyhow. Brutality and violence has not changed, but there has been expanded opportunities for minorities and women, but there has also been an overburdening of police duties regarding responses to mental health calls. Advances to technology and surveillance have occurred, but why hasn't this improved policing? So the question seems to be looking at technology and surveillance, and why hasn't that improved policing as regards to violence?
Okay, as far as the technology part of it, it has improved as far as officers being able, like I think about in Chicago, we have ShotSpotter, and based on officers in these rooms, they're able to kind of use a triangle type of situation where they can kind of identify where a shot is coming from before a citizen's even call. So technology has helped officers to police better, but that in itself doesn't mean they're going to police residents in the community any better. We're talking about two separate things. So technology, it does improve the ability to police, but it doesn't mean that officers or some officers are going to treat residents in the community any better. There's other pieces to that. And as far as how the brutality and violence has not changed, but there have been expanded opportunities for minorities and women, but there's been so overburdened by police duties regarding response to mental health calls. I'm not sure if something has changed now. It almost, before I retired in 2019, it almost felt like every other call, it dealt with a mental. So I'm not sure if we have more situations where individuals are mental. It's almost like every other call you went to, there was this mental component. And it's not always someone who's trying to kill themselves. It might be someone who's going through an anxiety, someone who has not taken their medication, whatever. And of course, they're going to call 911. And that's part of the discussion where they want to see if some of that can be doled out to social services, depending on the nature of it. So those are still discussions that's happening with different departments. But like I said, when you talk about violence and brutality, you're talking about a whole nother segment of it that departments have to actually, like I said, address the fact that systemic racism is real, and it's a part of their department. And you have to start holding officers accountable, which means you have to start dismantling things such as qualified immunity that protects bad officers.
That's a good point. Now, brother, I'm looking at the time. We are 1 minute. So I asked every guest this question, and Shawn, I really look forward to your response to this one. But what message do you have for America?
My message would be, do not give up on your police officers. Hold them accountable. Find the ones that you can actually work with. If you have a situation, make sure you report it. Never feel that it's defeated, because you have a lot of officers out there, like many officers who are part of our organization, NABLEO, who was out there trying to make a difference. And we have done a lot of positive things. And I know that when things happen negatively, it paints the entire police department. it paints us as well. And trust me, we feel the same way that you do, but try not to give up on your police officers. Hold them accountable, because the good officers, they welcome your input. Trust me, they welcome your input. And sometimes we might have to change policies or laws that might restrict officers more so, just to try to, rebalance the unbalanced justice system that's there. But you do have officers, like I said, trying to make a difference. I'm retired and I'm still out there working hard, trying to make a difference on behalf of other Black officers who are feeling isolated, and also our community, because I'm part of the community. So if I'm willing to do this on my retirement time, and I'm busier now than I was when I was at work, I just simply ask you to try to be more patient, hold us accountable, but we're there trying to make a difference for our community.
Well, Brother Shawn, it's definitely a pleasure. I know you agreed to stay on for the after party. The after party is a 15-minute extension, guys. So if you have questions for Shawn, please put them in the chat. But officially, I'd like to close this program and thank everyone for watching. And so everyone have a great night. If you have other questions, stay on. Shawn's going to stay on for an extra 15 minutes. So everyone have a great night. So Shawn, they can still hear us, by the way. Just after a while, they can still hear us. Oh, man. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and submit them. Otherwise, I'm going to keep Shawn much longer as well. See, Charles Wilson says, great interview.
Charles is biased. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
I love Charles. That I think so Charles was one of the folks who did the Capitol Special Edition, right? And he, funny, we were just talking about this before we aired. We were talking about, the person that gets the first question and not afraid to jump into the question. So that was Charles for the episode. And, I thought it was interesting because the first question was, was pretty much, what are your thoughts about the insurrection? And Charles got right into that. And it was like, truth be told, here's what we're going to do.
Yes. You have to be willing to call a spade a spade. Just put the information out there. There's no reason to sugarcoat it. We just have to be truthful and have these candid conversations, not just with our peers, but also with our counterparts. Because when we start, like a lot of times with NABLEO's conferences, we have a lot of our white and Hispanic counterparts there at the table. So when you talk about implicit biases, police brutality, whatever, yeah, we talk about amongst ourselves. But when you have our counterparts at the table, they get a chance to hear our perspectives. And sometimes they have no idea. And we get a chance to hear their perspectives. And that's how I feel that we start to come to some type of middle ground.
Yeah, I really, and I mean, that was one of the episodes that technology failed me, right? I remember halfway through, I got a text message from somebody I was watching saying, YouTube just stopped. And I was like, no! And we had a good crowd. We had a good discussion going on. I think that, it was so important, especially at that time, to hear from the law enforcement community speaking how they felt about the incident that took place. I want to see that happen more. I mean, I think that's another thing too, Shawn. If we had police officers, feel empowered to express how they feel when things in their community happen, right? Mm-hmm. Don't gotta agree with them, but actually be able to say, this is how I feel, and have some true reconciliation with that community. I think that would go a long way.
Well, a
You know?
lot of Black citizens, a lot of times they ask, where are the Black officers at? Why haven't they said anything? And they don't
Yeah.
understand why haven't they been more vocal? You know, they don't understand what happens to like a Nakia Jones or Carrier Horn. And that's
Right.
one of the things why we're so active on our social media platforms. Yes, we're going
Yeah.
to put out a variety of information out there about what's happening with Black officers, but we're also letting them know that you have organizations like NABLEO who's going to come behind or stand with those officers and have a voice with them, and we're not afraid to speak out. I think about when we had our part 2 of our webinar, Reimaging
Yes.
Culture Police.
Image, please. Yes.
We specifically had officers on there who were not retired. These were officers giving their true perspective very candidly, and they are still currently officers. So we felt it was very important for officers to listen to and hear officers who are willing to truthfully express themselves about what's going on, knowing that they are still working police officers.
Right.
Very important to
Right.
see.
You know, I was taking. I attended the part 2, and I
Mhm.
was taking a lot of notes as I typically do. One note I remember, and just because it was so fresh in my head, the webinar happened. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks after the insurrection,
Yes.
right? And so
Mhm.
it was fresh in my brain. One thing I remember was the question that is it the responsibility of Black law enforcement to deal with institutional racism in policing? And this was a split. I think this was a split opinion on this, right? You have some that say, yeah, there's a responsibility to address it because this is my community, and then you got another side that says, I didn't make it happen. I didn't, I didn't build institutional racism. It's not my responsibility. Sean, I'd like to get your thoughts on that one.
Well, I feel even though Black people did not create this this situation of institutional systemic racism, we did not. But we also know, at least I feel, nothing is going to be handed to us. You know, we talked earlier about that you're optimistic. You know, regardless of what we still see in 2021 compared to 100 years ago, it's still happening. You know, you have never gained anything by just waiting for someone to hand it to you and say, "Here, this is what we're giving you." What we
Right.
have, what we have received is based on people willing to stand up, go to jail, speak out, have press conferences, do
Right.
whatever they have to do to keep the pressure on. So yes, I do feel that it is Black officers' responsibility to still speak up, speak out, and fight for their community. They are part of the community. And that's why our organization, NABLEO, we are willing to step up and speak out and support those officers who are willing to do that so they won't be by themselves. You know, if we're not willing to do it ourselves, no one else is going to do it in our place.
Right. Absolutely. Again, part of my optimism comes from seeing that too, right? When I first started doing the Battle with Moses people, during the Q&A session, people would ask me, why aren't Black officers speaking out when they see injustice? And that's exactly how this started.
Mhm.
Because I was saying they do. You got to able to find them, right? So we had a question here. What does that support look like? Um, that's a good question because I know the answer to this question, Sean. Because I follow NABLEO, I follow the other Black organizations. I see exactly what you guys are doing. But that is an excellent question. I'll let you take that one.
Yes, it is. It depends on the situation because each situation is different. So most recently, I think about a brother from New Haven, Connecticut, 17-year officer who happens to be a sergeant. When he first reached out to us in December, he happened to say that he has been disciplined over 24 times, and I'm thinking, okay, you just getting all type of trouble, and you want us to help you. But when I actually called him and we were on the phone talking, then I understood better what was going on, because it actually started from the day he was in the police academy. And part of his situation was that sometimes in some departments, Black officers are disciplined much more egregiously than their white counterparts. So he has been involved in several different types of situations with his white counterparts. And each and every time he will come out with 5-day suspension, 10-day suspension, 20-day suspension. And then when he look at his white counterparts, zilch. And that has been the extent of his 17-year career, which is so, it's amazing for me to actually know that I'm in my department, Chicago, and I've had a wonderful career, even still being aware of what's out there. And this guy in his department, where there's only, I believe, 10 Blacks, his whole 17 years have been fighting, to the point that he's number 2 on the lieutenant's list. And they have 2 openings that's coming up. So his last 20-day suspension, his union, which is part of the problem as well. The unions are part of the problem. His union tried to encourage him to give up his sergeant position so that can serve his 20-day suspension. And he can take the test some other time. Well, the problem was they didn't want him to be promoted to lieutenant. So when he decided not to take that unsweet deal, in my opinion, he instead served his 20-day suspension. And then that's when the police union and his department got together and came up with other rules in midstream, which was if you have been suspended for 20 days or more and other things, they're going to start taking your seniority points away from you, which affected his his position on the lieutenant's exam. He moved from 2nd place down to 4th place. So that's when he decided to file his federal lawsuit. And that's when NABLEO got involved, and we put out a press release showing our unequivocal support for this officer, because we wanted him to know that he's not by himself. And when we put out a press release, it goes on a national level more so than just local level, so he can know that he has someone out there who's willing to fight for him. As a matter of fact, based on our press release, we had to actually reach out to the NAACP in New London to try to get them to step up their game as well. So it really depends. Right before that, we had a situation, an ongoing situation with officers with St. Louis County Police Department. And if you follow us on our Facebook, you will see that things have, this systemic racism there is just so out of control. So when we put out a press statement that time, we also had 12 other local and national organizations to sign off on it with us, because we wanted to have much more support and to let it be known that we are doing this in solidarity. And sometimes it's hard to get organizations to work together because, we have different agendas or whatever, but we're starting to work more as a unified, show the solidarity to protect officers. So like I said, it just depends on what's going on. We even in Chicago, we got together and we held a press conference for some things that was happening with our FOP trying to remove 2 officers from the union because they decided to take a knee with peaceful protesters. These type of ridiculous things. So it just depends on what the situation is, what that officer would like to do, because we never want to do something that they feel uncomfortable with. So it simply depends. But we make sure they know that they are not by themselves. If we have to try to help raise money with our many networks, we'll do that. It's just a variety of what we're willing to do. It just depends on the situation and the officer involved.
That's a great thing. I remember when Carrie Horn was putting out her story this summer. The day that it went on CNN, we had Strategies for Justice. We had police officers reach out to us saying, I have a similar story to Carrie Horn, right? And I remember there was a brother from Florida who reached out and we communicated, and he went through the academy. He was a newly hired, and he was trying to explain to his department why people supported Colin Kaepernick. And when he was doing that, his police chief told him, "You've really got two choices. You can resign or we face retaliation." So the brother resigned.
Mm-hmm.
He then went on to be in the army, but that got me thinking, every time someone comes forward like this and put that story out there, and then get support from a national organization, it empowers other police officers that experience the same exact thing to say, "Wait a minute, this is happening to me too." Right? I think that's really where I love the solidarity, of course, because when we get together, right, and it doesn't. Sometimes we have different focuses, but the same exact goal.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we start to work on that same exact goal together, I think it's a very powerful thing. And I said I knew the answer to that question because I've seen about 4 or 5 press releases, at least in the past couple of months, from NABLEO in different situations. And sometimes it even brings to light for me, oh, this is happening in this place, this is happening in that place. So that's really important. And that was a great question.
And there's so many things we're doing behind the scene. Like we're pairing up with like-minded officers and organizations, whether it's a local level or a national level. One of the things we're trying to come up now is a national strategy to address what's happening to Black officers. Because, like I said, what's happening in St. Louis, in Chicago, New Haven, it's happening nationwide. But I think it feels it's more exacerbated when you have a really small department where everyone knows one another. There's no place for you to leave here and then work in that unit because it's so small. And those situations, those officers, like I said, when your department wants to keep you in your place and they make examples out of you, so that keeps other officers from speaking up. And based on the different press releases that you spoke of, we're having officers to reach out to it because it's like, okay, you all are having this officer here and you're doing this over here. Let me share with you what's happening, in my situation. Right. But one thing I have learned is, and a lot of times we will give different options or guidance, what have you. But I have learned that we cannot or will not have an officer who's not willing to help themselves. That's why it's very important to ask them, what would you like to do about the situation before we move forward?
Right. That's a good point. So Shawn, man, I appreciate you in so many ways. I think that I think there's a lot of work that obviously our organization can do together. I look forward to working with NABLEO in the future.
Terry,
yes.
That's one of these questions. NDRE asks, is there a national meeting of the Black organizations together?
Yeah, like a coalition. See, I know that would be great if there was like a coalition in which we can say we're all going to meet at one time, discuss the common issue. So, okay. Shawn, go ahead.
So let me answer that. And actually, I've been having this discussion with several officers, and we're actually putting together as we speak. We're doing some work with the Center for Policing Equity, and we're trying to determine, and we're starting small because it's not a situation where every different organization is going to be on board, because each organization's objectives or their methodology is different. So what we try to do is invite people who we feel are progressive enough and they're ready to be vocal enough to make a difference. That's not going to fit everybody, but some things we do, we have to at least invite people to the table. Now, whether they choose to be on board or not, that's really up to them. But our main thing is we're moving straight ahead to help officers, and not just officers who are still there, but generations to come. We have to we should want to leave things in a better place for those officers, just like our forefathers and mothers did for us. Even though we're still having the same fights, but we are still reaping the benefits that they did not have. So to answer your question, yes, we have reached out, and we're actually forming something right now. We're actually trying to come up with a date for a small contingent of us to get together, and then we're going to decide which other organization that might be a good fit to have a couple of people join in on this. But we're taking this national strategy on a much broader level. But every organization is not going to be part of it, either because this is just not what they do or any other number of reasons. But it's not going to stop us from our mission.
Amen. Yeah, I love the idea of some kind of coalition, because like I said, there's a goal. Even last night we had 3 organizations that was on the same forum. They had 3 distinct different missions, but what you saw last night was that they had a similar goal, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And even though they had their own mission, it was something that we could obviously see that their work could accommodate one another.
Yes.
And I think that's exactly so. So the sister said she can't wait to hear more. I think that I posted the website to NABLEO. You mentioned police equity, excellent organization, by the way. Started by the brother. I can't remember his name, but I know he's a faculty out of. Oh my God.
Well, the Center for Policing Equity. I'm not sure who founded it, but one of the co-founders is Tracy Kessie.
Yeah, I remember Tracy. Yeah, great organization. One thing I like about equity is that they have some good. How do you call it? When they do their analysis,
Yes.
right? They have some really fantastic. Like I've been following them for a while now. So I'm so happy to see that, because one of the things that I always say, what we always need in this work is someone to document it and document it well.
Yes.
I would say on my end, I'm looking at building a institution for good policing. And that's going to be a sort of a collaboration of lawyers, because as Shawn mentioned, whenever there's a lawsuit, a lawsuit worthy cause, there's usually a fight back from the police unions, right? So the PBA, and one of the things we know for a fact is that whenever there is a police officer that have experienced themselves misconduct, they have a hard time finding legal representation.
Well,
and so what we're trying to do is have a coalition of legal minds to get together to practice and learn how to deal with police misconduct in their own organizations.
Well, Terry, you and I, we're going to be doing some more work together, because one of this coalition strategy is also to look at a possible national legal fund for Black officers.
Yes.
And I think about what's happening in St. Louis, where you have the ethical of police are doing phenomenal work.
Amazing work.
They're Black officers, and they have several white officers who are part of their organization as well. Because what a lot of people don't understand, and like I said, in my opinion, the unions can also be a big part of the problem. There are many officers, Black officers I've spoken to, that the union would not represent them, and when they did, they gave them subpar legal representation, where the officers felt that it was more important for them to spend their own money to hire their own attorney. So then I have to go back to ask, why are you giving the union your dues? Especially since the 2018 United States Supreme Court ruling, Janus versus Axme, which allows you to still reap the same collective bargaining agreements without having to pay union dues. So that's a whole nother discussion.
Yep. Yeah. I'll tell you right now, with the when we had a chance to speak with Heather Taylor, who was I don't she's not the president anymore of ESOP, but I know she, like you, after retiring, is probably doing more work now in retirement than they were when they were active law enforcement. But she specifically is looking also at ending qualified immunity, and with that said, looking at that legal component too. That's going to be that is so important, because I don't know if people understand this. Like when I first talked to like, for example, Monica Blake out of Tennessee, she had finding a lawyer to represent her was like a huge part of that battle. Like no one wanted to touch that case because of the police unions. And so I do think that is a really important piece. And Shawn, like I said, I know we're going to do more work together in the future. That's a given. I'm just so excited that that we have organizations thinking on the same page, hopefully collaborating, and definitely building some type of institution to reverse the current institution, if that makes sense.
It does, and it's one of those situations where Black police associations really need to evaluate what their objectives and missions are, because as things change in our society, we have to be able to adapt to those changes, and sometimes we have to step out of our comfort zones based on what we are accustomed to have done in the past, and need to start doing things on a different level, using different media sources, and just much more proactively. But like I said, I'm hoping that NABLEO is going to be that inspiration for other organizations to step forward. But I think it occurs from being that example, from actually not just talking it, but showing it. And a lot of times people will then come on board after the fact. But the main thing is someone has to take the initiative and step out there and do that. And there are a lot of like-minded people who are on board. So like I said, this is just too strong, it's too powerful. We are not about to give in. And someday in the future, I'm just trying to figure out who I'm going to build for all this. But it's going to be well worth it. It's going to be well worth it. It will be.
Yes. I look forward to the day of celebration. I'm hoping Friday is a lead to one of those celebrations with Carry On Horn.
Yes.
And that fight for a pension.
Yes.
And I know that if you are a person of faith, please put that prayer in, because it is time to make her whole. To the question, how can I help? If you want to reach out to Shawn or NABLEO, I can put that website back in the chats.
Okay, and I know India, so she has my contact information. But if anybody wants to reach out to me, they can reach out to me via Facebook Messenger. It's my name, Shawn Kennedy. You will see my face with a little something or whatever up there, and just send me a message, and I will always respond. But also, you can send a message through our NABLEO Facebook page as well.
All right, and for Strategies for Justice, if you go to strategiesjustice.com, or if you just Google Strategies for Justice, you can definitely reach out to us at any time too. So I'm pretty sure this is going to be a continuation conversation with Sonia Pruitt in 2 weeks too.
Woo!
Because
I'm gonna be the first person signed on with Miss Pruitt. Yes, I love her.
It's funny because I think she posted something because she's an MSPC contributor, right? So she posted that video. I think you commented on it, and she was like, "Is Shawn the president of my fan book club?" And I said, "Sure, but I can run for vice president." Yeah, I will.
Terry, I love I love women who are not afraid to speak up. I love women who are unapologetically who they are. You know,
Yeah.
and I remember, like I said, during our second webinar, it came up. Vincent
Yes.
Montague, who's the president of the Black Shield Police Association, he happened to mention what Black men need to start doing and stepping
Mm,
up and
yeah.
supporting and standing with our Black women. You know,
Yeah.
they're so outspoken because a lot of Black men, you know, kind of step back into the shadows, and we need to
Right.
change that. But we change that by setting the example, by talking about it and showing it.
Exactly. Exactly. And I know Cario and Nakaya made statements on that alone,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in 2021, that needs to be like the resolution and the New Year's resolution. Because New Year's resolution for Black men in America is to uh, begin to step up for our sisters, especially the ones that are out there and being outspoken. I mean, I when I put out the call for the insurrection conversation, you know, because you were helping me track people down. I put a call out to everyone, and it was happened to be the folks that responded back were the majority Black women,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
And that is a statement in itself. And
Yes, it
and
is.
people ask me all the time, well, Terry, why do you only have Black officers on your show? Because they're the ones that say I'm going to join you. My show is equal opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're willing to talk about the consciousness, I'm willing to have you on. But it just happens to be that the ones that are showing up are those officers of color, and the majority of them are Black women. So, uh, even last night, right? That was a call for diversity in law enforcement, and it happened to be 3 Black women that showed up to that one, right?
It wasn't
Um,
3 Black women. It was 3
four.
women.
Oh, you're right. It was 3 women. 2 are Black, 2 are white, but 4 women showed up to that call. You're right. You're right.
Flip it
So
back. You had 1 Black woman and 2 white women.
2 white women, but
Yes.
again, that goal was similar, right? And
Yes.
but the representation again was, I always look at the visuals, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am that person. I remember I was doing the presentation, the Battle of Moses People, which is the conversation about my ancestors, and I was presenting it to the crowd, and it was one of the aisles, right? So on the left side, right side, and on the left side was all the white people, and on the right side was all the Black people. And before I even opened my mouth, I said, "This is so awkward to present to this group, like visually, right?"
Mm-hmm.
It was a university too, right?
Yes.
And it was not just students, and it wasn't just faculty, it wasn't just staff. It was students, faculty, and staff. So all the white students, faculty, and staff were on one side, and all the students, faculty, and staff of color were on the other side. And I said, as a person presenting, talking about the conversations about Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter, this is a very telling story. Just visually. I don't know if you all know each other or you came here together. I don't know. But presenting to an audience in which you visually see that, it does say something. And that also reminded me when I went to go see Dave Chappelle. Uh, Dave Chappelle was doing his comedy stand up at my university, and the lights were off, right? Because presenting, and so he's doing his stand up. At the end of his show, he says, "Hey, can someone turn the lights on? I want to see the crowd," right? And they turn the lights on, and I kid you not, Shawn, there was a circle of all those Black folks in the middle, right, right, and then we were just surrounded by a sea of white people, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he was like, do all you guys know each other? And it was like, just we didn't know each other. It just planned out that way. It wasn't, it just that I guess we got the tickets first, and we got the prime seats, which is like dead circle of the stadium, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we knew who Dave Chappelle was, and it was like, yeah, we got to see Dave Chappelle. And then people called on afterwards. But the visual was very clear when I was presenting that, and I look at that even with the forums, right? I look at that with anything that we're doing what does it look like? And to me, yeah, it's even the insurrection conversation, was very telling. That first of all, everyone was black. I invited, I did send an invite to police unions. I did. Why not? I said, hey, these are police officers. You supposed to represent police officers. Come join us. Talk about how you feel. I got no response.
What's interesting, I know that when you have forums, you're going to have people who feel comfortable, sitting next to someone who they like. But I remember a conference that NABLEO gave. It was at Brown University. And Charles had it specifically set up. It was name tags at each table because he wanted to make sure people from different places.
Smart.
Yeah, and it was amazing when they came in and they wanted to change it. Like, no, you can't change it. But it kind of forced them to interact with people who they wouldn't have, sat with. And they wind up, after a while, they start actually having conversation and whatever. But it was an objective. We wanted people to understand we're all in law enforcement. Get to know someone, see what they're thinking, share some information with them. But like I said, at the end of that conference that day, it was wonderful. I really like the way that Charles set that up because we get a chance to really engage with people who we normally don't engage with.
That is smart. That's real smart. Yes. All right, Shawn, man, this has been an awesome after party, man. I appreciate it. We still got people watching, but that's all good. I kept Shawn on now for literally an hour and a half.
Brother, I'm retired. I'm a man of leisure. I can do this.
Shawn, you said to me, man, you was like, I think this could be a 2-hour episode. I was like, nah, no way. Here we are, an hour and a half later, we're still talking. By the way, guys, Shawn and I actually talk on the phone quite often, and our conversations goes just as long. So this is nothing new for me. But hey, Shawn, I do appreciate it. I'm gonna have some dinner actually. My wife brought me a plate of food. It's cold now, but I'm gonna put it in the microwave. But hey, brother, I appreciate you, everything that you do. I will reach out to you too because I know that I asked NABLEO to be part of the symposium to do a workshop. So we'll be talking to you soon about that as well. And I do appreciate everything that you, Chuck, and the whole organization does for law enforcement, not just Black law enforcement, but for law enforcement overall. So I do appreciate that.
But Terry, I want to thank you for providing the platform for us to have these conversations. And like you said, you put information out there across the board to have Black officers, white officers, Hispanic officers. All you can do is put the information out there. But you are providing a platform for officers to come together and speak. And also, you have community members who are listening to this. They want to, like they ask, where are the Black officers? Why are they not speaking up? And they get a chance to learn a lot from the platform that you have put out there. This is so very important. And I feel honored that you invited me to participate in this.
Well, brother, I'm so happy to have you on board. And I'm going to say this finally to everyone. I kept Shawn for an hour and a half, but if you guys have any questions about NABLEO, visit their website. I posted in the chat. I also posted the newsletter at the beginning as well that I referenced at the beginning. So if you have time, read that newsletter. I think it's so much important information. I've learned quite a bit from reading it. Also, there's a brother in there, the psychologist that was on the panel that you guys held. I can't remember his name.
Dr. Daniel Howard.
Yes, yes, Holler. Yes, wonderful. I think that his perspective is well, his experience is amazing.
Yes,
right. His experience is amazing, but his perspective is as well. And he had some information in that newsletter as well. So if you get a chance, please read that newsletter. So much great information. And Shawn, thank you so much. And everyone, have a great night.
See you.
See ya.